You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 276.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How is everybody doing today? We are here 4 days before the celebration of Christmas, which is the winter holiday that I celebrate, and I do hope that in some way you are celebrating too. If you have been celebrating Hanukkah or other winter holidays, you know that this is a very different time of year, and something that in my life I guess I've always been very attuned to is the change of seasons. I've probably talked about that a lot on the podcast, and growing up in a large Catholic family, we were always in sync with the seasons. Not just what's going on with the weather, but also what was going on with the liturgical calendar for being Catholic, and then also with what was going on socially in Kentucky with the calendar, with sporting events and things that happened in the schools that we went to. And we really pretty much continued this tradition while raising our children. And many years ago, I think it was on Christmas Eve, we had the radio on here at our house when our kids were little, and it was tuned into 90.9 WGUC, which is the public radio station from the University of Cincinnati. They play classical music, and they had Christmas music on, and it was just a nice thing to have on in the house. And they took a break, and they read a story while they were broadcasting the music called Barrington Bunny. And I was so touched by listening to them tell the story that I searched for the story, Barrington Bunny, which was actually embedded in a book that I'm going to tell you about, and have read this story to myself every year around Christmas time. And this also reminds me of something else. Lately, we've been listening at dinner to a podcast production of Scrooge, listening to them do different episodes of the Christmas Carol on the radio. Something I love to do when I cook dinner is use my little portable speaker, tuned it into a podcast that I listen to about Kentucky sports radio. And that may sound kind of odd, but they talk about sports, but they also talk about things going on in Kentucky, and love to listen to that while I'm cooking dinner. So I've always had this affinity for radio and listening to things read to me on the radio, talked about on the radio. And something I haven't done a lot of here is mostly solo shows that you listen to. Of course, interviews with other cookbook writers, people who collect cookbooks. We have an interview coming up with someone who loves to collect cookbooks and recipes, but doesn't necessarily consider herself a cook. But today I thought I would do something a little bit different in the spirit of the holiday season, and that is I'm going to read a couple of passages to you. One from the Kitchen Diaries by Nigel Slater, another passage and story from The Year of Miracles by Reisbridger. I'm going to read the story of Barrington Bunny by Martin Bell in the book The Way of the Wolf, and that is going to be our podcast for today. So if you want to listen to the stories, feel free to stay tuned in. Otherwise, I will be back next week with a year-end episode for the Cookbook Love Podcast, and then we'll resume our interviews with cookbook authors in January. So let's start with the story from the book The Year of Miracles by Reisbridger. I don't know if you're familiar with Ella. I was sent this book by her publicist, Emily Fishman, and I have not had her on the show, although I think I would love to. I just don't think it worked out with our schedule. But she's the author of the book called Midnight Chicken, which was a book that showed readers how food can serve as light in our darkest days. In this book that I'm going to read from today, called The Year of Miracles, Ella shares her story of recovering from loss with the help of good food and good friends. The book celebrates making a fancy dinner, even if you're eating it with a spoon in front of the TV, having people over to dinner without overthinking it, finding late night snacks to ease you to sleep, and having seconds of everything. Above all, A Year of Miracles is a powerful testimony to how cooking can help us get up and start again in the face of unimaginable hurt. Okay, so this is a story from the December chapter. It goes month by month. I just absolutely adore these kinds of books, and it's called Fried Jam Sandwiches. There's a lot of things people get wrong about ghosts. The first thing, or maybe just the most pertinent thing here and now, is that Halloween has nothing on Christmas for genuine hauntings. Birthdays are bad, and weddings and christenings and other people's funerals, but Christmas, if you celebrate Christmas, is a minefield of ectoplasm and sudden, unexpected jolts. Every day is a memory, and every day is a haunting. My house is full of ghosts at Christmas. The box of ornaments alone brings out half a dozen. A straw angel from my childhood home, and a pair of glass angels from Warsaw, where my father, estranged, lived when I was little, and before he was gone from my life. A heavily embellished glass crab with beady black eyes, which Joe and I bought on a whim to make the crab see that we were thinking of him. The guitar string that Danny snapped the first evening I met him. A string of beads spelling out our names. Ella, Ella, Otto, Joe, Jim, Nancy, Danny, and Beazle. A bone from curry goat, from the first Christmas curry party, polished and painted and hung on a ribbon. These ghosts are medicinal ghosts, bittersweet but bearable. Good ghosts, living ghosts, almost in the continuity of Christmas, in spite of it all. I unwrap them from their tissue paper and lay them across the kitchen table. Then there are different ghosts, worse ghosts. The tinsel Zelda brought from Paris the year I had no decorations at all. The tiny tree that sat in Jim's hospital room, even though he no longer seemed to know what Christmas was or who we were. These ghosts are the violent ones. The obvious ones, if you like. Think of frantic 999 call, blood on the walls, the shape of a fried egg abandoned in a skillet. The thing is, if you fry an egg in a skillet and leave it there for several days, the shape of the egg remains rusted into the iron for a long time after, even after you've scrubbed it and scrubbed it and scrubbed it. You're not supposed to scrub cast iron, and if you do, you're supposed to re-season it. But seasoning was Jim's job, not mine. And washing up was supposed to be Jim's job, not mine. And Jim was never Jim after that morning. So it never got done again, not properly, and the shape of the egg made a ghost in the pan forever. Or what felt like forever, for now it's gone. This was the 6th day of Jim's stupid Lego Advent calendar, and is now, I suppose, the first day of Christmas hauntings. The last egg, the last steps, the last real words. He had brain surgery on New Year's Eve that year, and Danny came home from Scotland with a bottle of gin and a jar of jam for making unholy cocktails. And Nancy brought tarot cards, and we told our fortunes over and over, looking for the future, which is now. We made fried jam sandwiches with the end of the jam and mourned her grandfather who had died, and Jim, who was dying. We buttered cheap bread, dredged it in eggs and sugar, fried them like grilled cheese, under the same heavy iron skillet that had held the ghost of the breakfast, like a kind of impromptu jam donut crossed with French toast. The jam was molten, the eggy bread crispy and golden, the sugar powdery and floaty and delightful. It was a ridiculous thing to eat, but death is the most ridiculous thing of all. We couldn't go out. There was nowhere to go. I could not go anywhere but the hospital, and I didn't want to go. And so we wrapped ourselves around each other and told tarot card and ate fried jam sandwiches and waited. And Joe came from Manchester to sit grimly in the pub with me, holding my hand in absolute silence. She was Jim's friend then instead of mine, but I loved her for knowing to say nothing. And we sat, and we hoped, and we planned. We are planners. Next year, as Zelda says, in Jerusalem. This is how you lay a ghost like this. You make libations like an ancient Greek. You throw Christmas curry parties in their honor. You toast them with wine or with dumplings or with port. You make strangers say their names. You live for them. And this year there is none of that, and it's bleak and dark and strange. We count our dead, we cut our losses, and we mourn alone. There is no room on the kitchen counter for proper cooking. There are ghosts on every surface. Washi tape paper chains, poem garlands of alphabet beads and glittery pink wool. The antique glass baubles Jim bought me reluctantly our first Christmas together. Do we need them, he said. And I said yes, 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 the way I always did, the way I do. I want, even in this haunted time, to say yes. So I dig out the jam, the eggs, the butter, and the cheap white bread, and we keep in the freezer for emergencies. There is so much that should be happening that isn't, and so much that should never have happened that is. And it's also unlikely that there's nothing else to do but make fried jam sandwiches and hope. And that story by Ella Reisberger is followed by a recipe for jam sandwiches. And that is from her book, The Year of Miracles, Recipes About Love and Grief and Growing Things. Okay, next I want to switch to another seasonal book called The Kitchen Diaries, A Year in the Kitchen with Nigel Slater. This is an older book. It won an IACP. It was a finalist for the IAC Cookbook Awards. And it sits on part of my shelf with my cookbook collection, something that I love to just get down and read at whatever time of year I'm in. So we're currently at the end of December, so I'm going to read the passage from December the 23rd called A Bit of Pig. Now, as I'm reading this, I feel like I've read it before. I perhaps have read this on the podcast before. Maybe some of you that have listened for a long time maybe have heard me read this. If you're new here, welcome to the writing of Nigel Slater, and let's dive into A Bit of Pig. He goes on to say, I will do anything to avoid a queue. That includes getting up at an ungodly hour, pleading to get something delivered, or in some cases, simply going without. Tomorrow is the holy grail of queues, with that of my local butcher, cheese shop, and fish market, making across 4 or 5 neighborhood store fronts. The deli has no orderly queue, just a disorganized scrum. I get up early and go to the special Christmas farmers market for greens, which, needless to say, I have to stand in line for. And then I go to the butcher, no queue to speak of, though busier than usual for a weekday, and then to the cheese shop, 1 French and 1 British. Everything will be fine in the fridge till the 25th, and I cannot help but feel a little smug at having got so much done already, leaving me the possibility of actually enjoying Christmas Eve instead of standing and looking at someone's back. I return home with a vast piece of pork, a bag of fat, herb-flecked sausages, slices of fat bacon, a blood sausage, stock, smoked salmon, fish for Christmas Eve supper, 3 cheeses, and a head of celery, complete with soil and leaves, and somewhat impromptu purchase of a goose. I already have a squirrel stash of mineral water, champagne, onions, potatoes, parsnips, oranges, clementines, brandy, pears, and passion fruit ripening as I write. Cox's apples, mincemeat, plus all the usual fridge and cupboard stuff, such as Parmesan, lemon, olive oil, and butter. That leaves only oysters, bread, and cream to pick up tomorrow. I should explain the goose. My plan for Christmas lunch is oysters and champagne, followed by a majestic roast of Gloucester Old Spot pork and crackling, pork sausages and blood sausage, onion gravy, and roast potatoes with glossy red cabbage. We will have Mrs. Absby's Cheshire cheese and an oozing vacherin, followed sometime later by Christmas pudding with organic cream or brandy butter. The vegetarians will eat parsnip cakes stuffed with spinach and pine nuts. Not the turkey dinner that has always left me cold, but a sumptuous feast of organic meats and farmhouse cheeses. So far, so glorious. However, I have just discovered that I have to go through the same thing again on Boxing Day. So unable to face cooking and eating an identical meal for what will be my second Christmas lunch, I will instead offer smoked salmon, which keeps in better nick than oysters, roast goose with juniper sauce and an apple and lemon puree, roast potatoes and red cabbage, followed by Wigmore cheese and pears. Then much later, a sharp lemon and passion fruit roulade, which, although rich, has a bite to it that should offset the inevitable richness of the goose. If there's one thing better than Christmas lunch, it is 2 Christmas lunches. All right, I just got a lot of ideas for what we could eat on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and I love the little menus he talks about and the visuals and the way he goes out shopping for the ingredients. So those were 2 stories from food books. Again, the first one, Ella Reisberger's The Year of Miracles, and the second, The Kitchen Diaries by Nigel Slater. And now I'm going to finish with Barrington Bunny, which is the story that I heard many years ago on WGUC, read on Christmas Eve. This is from a book called The Way of the Wolf, The Gospel in New Images by Martin Bell. Barrington Bunny. Once upon a time, in a large forest, there lived a very furry bunny. He had one lop ear, a tiny black nose, and unusually shiny eyes. His name was Barrington. Barrington was not really very handsome bunny. He was brown and speckled and his ears didn't stand up right, but he could hop. And he was, I have to say, very furry. In a way, winter is fun for bunnies. After all, it gives them an opportunity to hop in the snow and then turn around to see where they have hopped. So in a way, winter was fun for Barrington. But in another way, winter made Barrington sad. For you see, winter marked the time when all the animal families got together in their cozy homes to celebrate Christmas. He could hop, and he was very furry, but as far as Barrington knew, he was the only bunny in the forest. When Christmas Eve finally came, Barrington did not feel like going home all by himself. So he decided that he would hop for a while in the clearing in the center of the forest. Hop, hop, hippity hop, Barrington made tracks in the fresh snow. Hop, hop, hippity hop. Then he cocked his head and looked back at the wonderful designs he made. Bunnies, he thought to himself, can hop. They're very warm, too, because of how furry they are. But Barrington didn't know whether or not this was true of all bunnies since he had never met another bunny. When it got too dark to see the tracks he was making, Barrington made up his mind to go home. On his way, however, he passed a large oak tree. High in the branches, there was a great deal of excited chattering going on. Barrington looked up. It was a squirrel family. What a marvelous time they seemed to be having. "Hello up there," Barrington called. "Hello down there," came the reply. "Having a Christmas party?" asked Barrington. "Oh, yes," answered the squirrels. "It's Christmas Eve. Everyone is having a Christmas party." "May I come to your party?" said Barrington softly. "Are you a squirrel?" "No." "What are you then?" "A bunny." "A bunny?" "Yes." "Well, how can you come to the party if you're a bunny? Bunnies can't climb trees." "That's true," said Barrington thoughtfully, "but we can hop, and I'm very furry and warm." "We're sorry," called the squirrels. "We don't know anything about hopping and being furry, but we do know that in order to come to our house, you have to be able to climb trees." "Oh, well," said Barrington, "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," chattered the squirrels. And the unfortunate bunny hopped off toward his tiny house. It was beginning to snow when Barrington reached the river. Near the river bank was a wonderfully constructed house of sticks and mud. Inside there was singing. "It's the beavers," thought Barrington. "Maybe they'll let me come to the party." And so he knocked on the door. "Who's out there?" called a voice. "Barrington Bunny," he replied. There was a long pause, and then a shiny beaver head broke the water. "Hello, Barrington," said the beaver. "May I come to your Christmas party?" asked Barrington. The beaver thought for a while. Then he said, "I suppose so. But do you know how to swim?" "No," said Barrington, "but I can hop, and I'm very furry and warm." "Sorry," said the beaver. "I don't know anything about hopping and being furry, but I do know that in order to come to our house, you have to be able to swim." "Oh, well," Barrington muttered, his eyes filling with tears. "I suppose that's true. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," called the beaver, and he disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Even being as furry as he was, Barrington was beginning to get cold, and the snow was falling so hard that his tiny bunny eyes could scarcely see what was ahead of him. He was almost home, however, when he heard the excited squeaking of field mice beneath the ground. "It's a party," thought Barrington, and suddenly he blurted through his tears, "Hello, field mice, this is Barrington Bunny. May I come to your party?" But the wind was howling so loudly that Barrington was sobbing so much that no one heard him. And when there was no response at all, Barrington just sat down in the snow and began to cry, with all of his might. Bunnies, he thought, aren't any good to anyone. What good is it to be furry and to be able to hop if you don't have any family on Christmas Eve? Barrington cried and cried, but he stopped crying. Barrington cried and cried. When he stopped crying, he began to bite on his bunny's foot, but he did not move from where he was sitting in the snow. Suddenly, Barrington was aware that he was not alone. He looked up and strained his shiny eyes to see who was there. To his surprise, he saw a great silver wolf. The wolf was large and strong, and his eyes flashed fire. He was the most beautiful animal Barrington had ever seen. For a long time, the silver wolf didn't say anything at all. He just stood there and looked at Barrington with those terrible eyes. Then slowly and deliberately, the wolf spoke. "Barrington," he asked in a gentle voice, "why are you sitting in the snow?" "Because it's Christmas Eve," said Barrington, "and I don't have any family, and bunnies aren't any good to anyone." "Bunnies are too good," said the wolf. "Bunnies can hop, and they are very warm." "What good is that?" Barrington sniffed. "It's very good indeed," the wolf went on, "because it's a gift that bunnies are given, a free gift with no strings attached. And every gift that is given to anyone is given for a reason. Someday you will see why it is good to hop and to be warm and furry." "But it's Christmas," moaned Barrington, "and I'm all alone, and I don't have any family at all." "Of course you do," replied the great silver wolf. "All the animals in the forest are your family." And then the wolf disappeared. He simply wasn't there. Barrington had only blinked his eyes, and when he looked, the wolf was gone. "All the animals in the forest are my family," thought Barrington. "It's good to be a bunny. Bunnies can hop. That's a gift." And then he said it again. A gift. A free gift. On into the night, Barrington worked. First, he found the best stick he could, and that was difficult because of the snow. Then hop, hop, hippity hop to Beaver's house. He left the stick just outside the door with a note that read, "Here's a good stick for your house. It's a gift. A free gift. No strings attached. Signed, a member of your family." "It's a good thing that I can hop," he thought, "because the snow is very deep." Then Barrington dug and dug. Soon he had gathered enough dead leaves and grass to make the squirrel's nest warmer. Hop, hop, hippity hop. He laid the grass and leaves just under the large oak tree and attached the message, "A gift, a free gift, from a member of your family." It was late when Barrington finally started home. And what made things worse was that he knew a blizzard was beginning. Hop, hop, hippity hop. Soon poor Barrington was lost. The wind howled furiously, and it was very, very cold. "It certainly is cold," he said out loud. "It's a good thing I'm so furry. But if I don't find my way home soon, I might even freeze." Squeak, squeak. And then he saw it, a baby field mouse lost in the snow. And the little mouse was crying. "Hello, little mouse," Barrington called. "Don't cry, I'll be right there." Hippity hop, and Barrington was beside the tiny mouse. "I'm lost," sobbed the little fellow. "I'll never find my way home, and I know I'm going to freeze." "You won't freeze," said Barrington. "I'm a bunny, and bunnies are very furry and warm. You stay right where you are, and I'll cover you up." Barrington lay on top of the little mouse and hugged him tight. The tiny fellow felt himself surrounded by warm fur. He cried for a while, but soon, snug and warm, he fell asleep. Barrington had only two thoughts that long, cold night. First, he thought, it's good to be a bunny. Bunnies are very furry and warm. And then, when he felt the heart of the tiny mouse beneath him beating regularly, he thought, all of the animals in the forest are my family. Next morning, the field mice found their little boy asleep in the snow, warm and snug, beneath the furry carcass of a dead bunny. Their relief and excitement was so great that they didn't even come to think where the bunny had come from. And as for the beavers and the squirrels, they still wonder which member of their family left little gifts for them that Christmas Eve. After the field mice had left, Barrington's frozen body simply lay in the snow. There was no sound except that of the howling wind, and no one anywhere in the forest noticed the great silver wolf who came to stand beside that brown, lop-eared carcass. But the wolf did come, and he stood there, without moving or saying a word, all Christmas Day, until it was night, and then he disappeared into the forest. That was Barrington Bunny from the book The Way of the Wolf, The Gospel in New Images by Martin Bell. So with that, I wish you all happy holidays, Merry Christmas, season's greetings, and I will be back next week with another episode of the podcast. I hope you all have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.